Announced to Murray, Jackson took the drug lorazepam in pill form.
I think they can salvage it, but it's going to depend on what their experts have to say.
So what they're going to say is that Dr. Murray, in this instance, was prudent and met the standard of care in dealing with this patient. And I think that's going to be their defense.
When trial resumes in the morning, the prosecution's sleep therapy expert, Dr. Kamengar, will take the witness stand again and face cross-examination from the defense. It's possible the prosecution will call another expert or two, but the prosecution is nearing the end of its case, and then the defense will have its opportunity. And one final note now about the expert testimony. It became apparent that Conrad Murray's own account that he gave police is not necessarily helping him. Again, the first medical expert testified that he based his conclusions solely on what Murray told police, not the other evidence that has come in about, for example, the 46 minutes of phone calls, the use of Dr. Murray's cell phone during the time before he discovered that Michael Jackson was in arrest. And in fact, the medical expert testified that he took Dr. Murray's account at face value, that he was out of the room for only 2 minutes, and that when he returned, he found Michael Jackson still with a faint pulse. And on account of that, he concluded that Dr. Murray should have been able to resuscitate Jackson, when in fact, in all likelihood, with 46 minutes of phone call, Jackson may well have been dead before Conrad Murray returned to the room.
All right, obviously that was Patrick Healy, and with us once again, legal analyst Edward Navarro, to discuss the highlights in the Conrad Murray trial today. Thank you. We just saw you in Patrick's story as well. There's something I gleaned from Patrick's story there. The doctor on the witness stand today said if Dr. Murray had not deviated, Michael Jackson would be alive. That has to be like the Perry Mason moment of this so far.
First of all, day 11 goes down in the history books for the prosecution, totally. The defense had an opportunity to do a cross-examination of Dr. Steinberg. I don't believe they did a good job. They kept asking questions that they thought they had answers to, and the answers that were being given by Dr. Steinberg were completely different than what they were expecting. As soon as the lunch break came, they ended their cross-examination and gave it back to the prosecution. And the prosecution had not only Dr. Steinberg, which is the cardiologist, who gave excellent testimony for the prosecution, was methodical, and gave 6 specific different reasons on how he breached or extremely breached his duty of care to his patient and the standard of care for doctors. Then we jumped into Dr., I believe his name is Kamengar, which was the sleep physician, and then he continued to break down each one of the breaches and let them know why he had breached the standard of care.
So how does the defense get any traction at all from this? And we heard Patrick talk about their experts. How did their experts debunk these experts? You
know, I was thinking about this earlier because now they're abandoning the whole story of that Michael Jackson swallowed the propofol himself. I see it as the only way they can come in and revive their story or come up with a good defense is to let the jury know that perhaps the standard of care was met as to this patient, specifically this patient. This patient had a lot of problems that we know of already. He had drug issues. And so one of the things that the defense has said is we can't just take him off completely off of the drugs because that will cause other damages to his body. So one of the things that they said yesterday is that they were trying to wean him off the propofol slowly, and they were giving him less and less dosages. And so I think what they're going to say is, yes, generally speaking, the standard of care for doctors perhaps was not met. But when we're dealing with this patient, the standard of care for this doctor was met. Will that be sufficient to overcome the manslaughter charge? I don't know, but I think that's what they'll say.
The defense maintained from the beginning, they mentioned this in opening statements, I believe, that Michael Jackson might have ingested the propofol. There were traces of propofol found in his stomach and not in his bloodstream. All of a sudden today, big surprise to a lot of people, they backed off that.
I think they've seen that the evidence that the prosecution has put forward has given them, I guess, more information that perhaps they didn't have before, including that there were no fingerprints on the propofol. We've got the toxicologist telling us that even if he ingested it, it doesn't mean that it's going to be in the stomach. It could have been there through post-mortem redistribution, which they got into technical account of on Friday and then yesterday again. And so I think they see that the burden is way too high for them to come up with that defense. So they're abandoning that so that they don't give the jury that, and they're going to come up with some other defense.
You're sitting in the jury box and you're watching this. 2 doctors who come in, they're just boom, boom, boom. It almost seems like a surgical strike. How does that resonate with the jury today?
I think, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say it just seemed very plain, very factual.
Not only was it plain and factual, they used specific words that will resonate with the jury when they're in the room deliberating. They said it was unconscionable what was done. It was unacceptable what was done. It was a multiple extreme deviation of standard and care. All these points are being heard by the jury today, and they will be heard again when they do the closing arguments by the prosecution. And that's what that's what the jury is going to go in the deliberation room with, and they're going to remember those words along with the photographs that they've seen, and they're going to say perhaps Dr. Murray was negligent in his care to a point where it was criminally negligent.
How important is this timeline they've been trying to establish? The doctor says he was on the phone for 2 minutes. There are phone records that show 46 minutes. How important is that? Because they keep hammering that almost every day.
And it's important because the defense says it was only 2 minutes that he was away from the room, and Michael Jackson could have either ingested it himself or nothing could have gone wrong within those 2 minutes. But we've got the cardiologist this morning and then this afternoon with the sleep physician saying that every second and every minute counts, and you cannot leave your patient without being observed when he's on propofol. We put that along with everything else that he had done wrong, or what they're saying he breached. They didn't have the right personnel. He didn't have the call to 911 immediately. We add all these things up, and every second seems to count. And so the defense is saying, well, it was only 2 minutes. It wasn't that big of a deal. There's no way that Dr. Murray could have been negligent to the point where Michael Jackson could have died because it was only 2 minutes. And these doctors are saying, well, even if it was just 2 minutes, we have a problem because he should be observed. But we have here more than 2 minutes. They're establishing a timeline of about 12 minutes before Dr. Murray summoned the security officer that was within the house for help. So we've got a story, and that's why it's so important. We've got a dispute over the facts. Was it 2 minutes or was it 12 minutes? And so we've got a 12-minute span, but the prosecution is making it a point to say even if it was 2 minutes, every second within those 2 minutes was precious, and perhaps they could have saved Mr. Jackson's life.
Wasn't there also the issue of if he did have a pulse, why would the doctor, Dr. Conrad Murray, begin to work on his heart first in administering CPR and not breathe for him?
And that's one of the things that they brought up. They said, well, a doctor at his level, or at any level really, should know how to administer CPR, and from the onset, the CPR that was administered by Dr. Murray was erroneous. He had him on the bed, even if he was pushing on the heart and the lungs to try to get him to revive. It was not a flat surface. He was just putting him deeper into the bed. And so they're saying that is another breach of the standard of care of any doctor. So I would like to see how they're going to overcome that. That's just a difficult way to overcome that.
And you believe the prosecution is wrapping up here?
I think so. They might have one or two more witnesses, but I think they've done a good job so far. And I think they're going to wrap it up. Well, tomorrow's the last day of court, so probably not by tomorrow, but by early next week, and then let the defense come in and do their part.
So that the jury has the 3-day weekend to think about it.
That's right.
All right, Ed, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate your insight here.
Thank you.
All right, the poll shows she was the most hated person in America. Now, a clinical psychologist tells us why she believes Casey Anthony fits the profile of a baby killer. That's next, right here on Nonstop News, LA.